Hey guys, we're here today talking about New World, and 5 misconceptions about the game that I personally see fairly often. Now the game has gone through a fairly interesting and dramatic development process, so having a misunderstanding or misconception about the game is definitely understandable, and finding current and up-to-date info is not always the easiest. The first misconception that I see about New World is that it is hardcore PvP with no PvE content. This thought is very understandable since the game was originally designed as a hardcore PvP game, but in the early phases of testing, this did not work out how they thought, and they have slowly shifted the game to have more PvE content. You do not drop your items when you die, and it is based on a 3-faction optional flagging system, which means if you desired, you can avoid PvP altogether. There are still players that complain there isn't enough PvE content in the game, but it will launch with 6 expeditions or dungeons. It does have some open world PvE events, like corrupted portals, and PvE invasions that attack settlements. Not to mention that there are different style of repeatable PvE quests, along with quite a few side quests. On top of all this, the developers have already hinted at and suggested that they will be adding more PvE content shortly after launch, which clearly indicates that PvE is definitely a focus of theirs as they develop the game further. The second misunderstanding that I've seen about New World is that it is a theme park game, and it is not. I wouldn't go so far to say that it is a sandbox MMORPG, but it is definitely not a theme park. The debate in the definition of theme park and sandbox can sometimes get vague and contentious, but I'll try and summarize it really quickly. A theme park game is just like the name implies, a theme park. There are rides laid out throughout the map, with set rules in place, height requirements, certain number of riders, and so on. You may get to choose what activity you take on and in what order, but the park is predetermined entertainment with a set of guidelines around it. A sandbox would be, again, as the name implies, a sandbox at a playground. Nothing in it but sand. You can have the annoying kids throwing sand at everybody. You can have people rolling around in the sand, trying to eat the sand, build a sandcastle, whatever that person wants to do, and that's how a sandbox game is supposed to be designed. Freedom of choice to the player to take on whatever activity they'd like, in whatever order, and whenever they want to. Now, obviously, in the gaming world, there is no true sandbox in that sense, and there will always be some form of level system, progression system, or locking some content behind some mechanic. It's inevitable with the coding of a game. But generally, sandbox games are more player-driven and freedom-based, where at the very least, the direction and path you're supposed to take is not always evident, and it's not shoved in your face, or you're not handheld through it. New World pushes farther away from that theme park category and more towards the sandbox category, although again, it's not a true sandbox game. This misunderstanding can cause a lot of players looking at New World to wonder, where's the main story quest? What effect does it have? How long is the story quest? And how does the progression go? None of these really matter because the game is pulling away from that theme park category, and the game's content and quality are not determined by the preset rides that the developers put out, and it's more determined by the player base, what you want to do, and how you want to spend your time, and it's much more player driven. The third misconception about the game is that there's no monster or enemy variety. If you did not progress very far in the closed beta, if you had the chance to play it, then you may not have noticed is that the first 25 levels take place in the same 4 starting zones. These starting zones use the same base mobs in them, and until you progress past 25, you don't really start seeing different types of enemies. Just in the first 25 levels, we get different types of animals in the form of bears, cougars, wolves, lynx, gators, and probably some I'm even missing, and all of them operate and fight differently. Even though most of the humanoid mobs are corrupted or lost, they also act different in a great number of categories. There are some mobs that crawl on the ground chasing you on their belly. There are enemies that are dual-wielding pistols. There are ones that are using melee weapons and combos. There are some elite mobs that throw javelins at you and have jumping and spinning attacks. You have shield and pistol enemies along with your brutish-looking zombies that just chase you around. And again, this is all just in the first 25 levels. I'm not sure what everyone complaining about the variety is exactly looking for in the enemies, but I saw quite a bit in the closed beta, and I explored past level 25 zones and saw quite a bit of monsters that I hadn't seen in the earlier ones. The other type of variety I've read people complain about is quest variety, which is our fourth misconception about the game. Now, first off, again, New World is moving more to the sandbox side, where questing is not a huge part of the game, and if you're sitting there spamming the same quest over and over, you probably are going to feel a little bored. But beyond that, the complaint is that they are doing the standard fetch and kill quests, which is typical in MMORPGs where you go out and you collect 10 of a certain item, or kill 10 of a certain mob. Now, quest innovation in MMORPGs is not easy and does not work great every time it's implemented, but that's an entirely another topic for another time. The point is that New World has these fetch and kill quests, and they come in a repeatable form which can make it feel like there's no variety if you're just spamming those over and over. But New World also had repeatable quests that would have you go out and harvest materials. There would be quests revolved around fishing, and there would even be PvP quests that had you go out and hang out in a certain area for a certain amount of time to keep enemy players out of that section. Maybe I'm someone who's just somewhat easily pleased in this category, but I feel like their quest variety is actually pretty solid. If you don't spend the time spamming the same quest over and over thinking that it's optimal and getting bored of it, and you actually spend your time going around the world, exploring, doing different style of quests, and engaging in different activities, you might find yourself having a better time. You could probably complain about quest variety in every MMORPG, and start seeing a pattern that almost everything is skinned under a kill or fetch quest, and just has different dialogue or different cover around it to kind of hide what you're really doing. But almost every quest you're ever going to do, you need to kill mobs for, or you need to deliver something, or get something. This is just how MMORPGs are, and how they always have been. And the fifth and final misconception or misunderstanding about New World is large guilds or the dominating faction taking over a server. Now, the misconception is not that this will or can happen. I definitely think it can happen, and it probably will on some servers. The problem that I have is the call for it to be changed. This is a misconception that the system needs to be changed, and the developers need to implement something to stop a guild from doing this. There are already systems and rules in place when it comes to PvP and faction wars. You can only attack at certain times, you have to do these certain things in order to build up the ability to attack someone. And all these rules are fairly similar to any other rules in, say, a sport like the NFL. And these are to be expected. But if you have the developers go out and specifically institute rules in order to keep one group from winning, that's essentially the equivalent of the NFL coming out and saying the Patriots are no longer allowed to win the Super Bowl because they've already won too many. As long as the players in New World are not hacking, cheating, or buying gold in some way in order to get these victories, then they should not be punished for their hard work and dedication. And here comes the controversial part, but if you're having a problem with them dominating a server and doing it within the rules of the game, then you may just not be equipped for the PvP system at large. If they coordinated with other players enough and built up a large enough company to take over the entire world, then why can't you build up a group of players, band together, and do the same thing right back at them? It was worth it enough to these large companies or guilds to dedicate time, manpower, resources, and networking in order to do this and take over all the settlements. And if it's not worth it enough for you to do the same thing to take settlements back, then they simply care more than you do. And this is all coming from a player who plays in a small company of probably 4 to 6 people and will not branch out from there and will not be joining a large company or guild. If this happens on my server, then I will be on the underdog side of that and will need to network, group up with people, band together, and fight back, as opposed to asking for the developers to change the systems and rules because some people are too good at it. That's my opinion on 5 things I've seen misunderstood about the game of New World. Hopefully it was informational for you, helped you see what some of the systems are actually like at this present time, and maybe dispelled some of these if you had them yourself. Let me know down in the comments about any misconceptions you've heard about the game so we can try and get everyone on the same page about how the game actually operates right now, since it's gone through so many changes throughout its development process. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.